protocols, like if you have a surgery with a tendon transfer in your hand, you have to do such and such at the 12th hour and such at the 48th hour, and there's really no messing around. But in the developmental work with children, we do a lot of preparing the environment. So I'm going to share my screen and open up a little PowerPoint that I made. Okay. So the title and our topic today is Making the Most of Your Environment, Preparing Therapeutic Spaces Outside of the Classroom. I will say a few things about the classroom because I just can't resist, but mostly I am going to be talking about really sort of making the most of other spaces like hallways or entryways, or I've even seen schools empty out broom closets and make a little sensory nook, or an outdoor as well, I'm going to talk about. So in addition to my OT practice, which is called Way to Grow, I'm in Frederick, Maryland. I am part of Montessori Medical Partnership for Inclusion, which I co-founded with my Montessori partner, Catherine Massey. And we, of course, are very interested in the full collaboration between medical people of all stripes, but really developmental medical people, and Montessorians. The idea that Dr. Montessori was a doctor and a Montessorian. And so when we're trying to replicate her work, if we really want to do that faithfully, it takes more than one person to be her, I always say. So really collaborating on trying to see, what are the sticking points, what is getting in a child's way, can be really helpful to consult with a medical person. Could be a OT, could be a speech therapist, could be a psychologist, developmental pediatrician. Each of us brings such a depth of knowledge, but the perspectives are a little different. And I always think about a pie, and we really need all those pieces. Some of these children are having metabolic problems and they need to really see a nutritionist. They're not going to, get their behaviors organized without that. And that's really a medical piece. So in any event, here's a little quote from Maria Montessori. She says, "The school constitutes an immense field for research. A joint labor of physician and teacher will sow the seed of a future human hygiene, adapted to achieve perfection in man, both as a species and as a social unit." So she didn't want much, just perfection, which that's a great goal. But I feel like every educational endeavor, pretty much, there are a few exceptions, I think we all need to be working more for having that whole child perspective, recognizing, the medical, developmental needs of children, and that it's very hard for them to fully engage with school and to be properly educated if they're having some other kind of mental or psychological problem. So this is really sort of a general comment. I do a lot of work with sensory integration, and I feel like there are a lot of things that are going on with children that are sensory based, and that could be children with a trauma background. It could be children with sensory processing disorder, children with autism, children with ADHD. So thinking sensory is a really good thing to do in your classroom, outside of your classroom. So that would include things like the lighting and the colors that you're putting on your walls. And I know that you all are wonderful at sort of really thinking about that environment from a sensory perspective. sounds, smells, textures. So if you have that little kiddo that just can't sit on the carpet for a group work, is there something about the texture of the surface that you're asking him to sit on that's really bothering him? And maybe that's the whole problem. So I think of this from a preparation perspective and also from a problem solving perspective. And of course, so that's always my first go-to, what's going on sensory wise with this child. So let's get to today's topic. So these are some of the kinds of supplementary spaces that I would encourage you to think about and that we're going to talk about today. So you can create sensory rooms, sensory nooks, and resource rooms. You can find rooms and spaces to create a calming down space. You can prepare spaces to provide inputs for calming, but also for alerting. And you can use hallways, entryways, common areas inside and outside the building. So I wanted to show you this. This is a fantastic architect. Her name is actually Kathy Purple Cherry, and she has Purple Cherry Architects. And she has a regular architecture firm, but she also has a adult child with a disability. So she's gotten involved in designing environments and spaces for children and adults with disabilities. So I want to point out here this beautiful therapeutic space. This is the lobby entryway area for a school that is designed to serve children with autism. So oftentimes children with autism don't like to be physically close. Some of them don't want to be touched unexpectedly. So she's created this beautiful wide open space here. And you can see on the left, these children are next to one another. They're not really interacting with one another, but they're interacting with some kind of texture, color. They have all these really cool responsive walls. So they could be touching it and maybe it's playing some music for them, or maybe the colors are changing. I'm not sure, what's going on there, but so there's kind of a whole visual, auditory, sensory spot where they can sort of be together, but they can manage their own distance from one another. They have control of that. Then at the far end of the space where it's raised like a little stage area, she's got these sort of enticing pictures. So again, it's another little place and two kids can be there and be together and be exploring the steps and the pictures and moving or sitting. And they're together, but they don't have to interact so closely. On the right, we have these little cubbies and they're all set up differently. Some of them have chairs that are facing in towards the open area. Some of them have sets of chairs that face each other. And I was actually looking around recently on the web and there's some new thing called sensory nooks. And you can just sort of buy these kits and they look a lot like this. They almost look like a little seating area at a diner, and you can put different things in there. They could have a table surface or not, just comfy chairs. But anyway, so she's created this area where it's a little bit cut off. And you'll notice also that the ceilings are lower there. She's got a ceiling thing there. So that's lovely. And then the ceiling itself in this main foyer, you've got a lot of natural light coming in above the cubby areas. And she's got these sound baffles, which also kind of break up the light. So, and the colors are very muted. So you can really see from every sensory perspective, she's really taken into consideration the kinds of ways that individuals with autism can be most comfortable and also be relating to one another. So I just think this is just lovely, lovely. So now this is not as visually lovely, but it's a hallway seating area. And so a lot of times I think this is probably from a school for individuals with like a separate school for individuals with special needs. But a lot of times they're going from place to place and people get tired. And so they can have a place that they can sit and take a rest, or they can visit and converse. Sometimes they are meeting someone. The speech therapist is taking them to meet the music teacher because the class is on their way to a music or something. And there's like sort of a gathering place. So again, the lighting is muted. They've kind of covered some of that window in the back. Looks like a lot of bright light coming in there, but they've put some little pieces of, I don't know what, to kind of dampen that down a little bit. And this is a picture from a school where I worked for a while. And this was a public school, ages 3 to 21. And I think it was every other Tuesday, the people would bring the therapy animals and everybody would come out. And so the hallways were big enough to have this animal event. Everybody would just be sort of strung out along the hallway, and different people would bring their animals along to different people. And then the students would be there and the teachers would be there. And it was really a lovely social interaction between, a lot of times between the children and the animals. So this shows you some examples of sensory rooms. These are set up to provide sort of dampened visual input here on the left in that blue tent. Some movement opportunities with the therapy balls, visual input with these bubble tubes, and a lot of those, they always do this, put a mirror behind. So this is one child, and the mirror just kind of amplifies light and the movement of the bubbles. Some of them come with switches that you can change the speed or the color of what's going on in there, speed of how the bubbles are rising. And then on the right is like a little yoga corner. And I'm not sure whether this was in a classroom or a resource room, but it could be either. This is a resource room that is set up more as, for older kids if they're needing somewhere to go to finish work. And of course, I would prefer to have more sensory equipment, which I'm going to show you in just a second. But I do want to point out this little fellow at the far end of the room there and how they have him positioned so that he's looking out the window. So you do need to prepare for each child. So for this child, that's a good thing, that he isn't interacting with all the people in the room behind him, and he's just, able to look out the window. For a different child, that might be the kiss of death, to be looking out the window, watching the butterflies, watching the birds, watching the clouds. So, but in any event, this is how, that is the place where if he's having trouble in his classroom, he can go down there and do his work. So this is, I can't show this to you, but this is a really great video. I've given the PowerPoint, and you can click on this link and go see this fantastic sensory room. It's on that site, Edgetopia. And it just shows how they use this sensory room. They bring all the kids in there, and they do sort of a warm up, which is what they're doing here. They're all just sort of doing deep breaths. And then they all get on the balls and they do some seated bouncing. And then they all sort of spread out. Somebody goes on the swing, somebody else is on these bolsters, somebody else is on trampolines. So they have a certain amount of time. And then I believe there's like a chime or something that they know is their signal that their time is finishing up. And then they line up and go back to their class. So this is just a beautifully designed sensory room. So I encourage you, after we're finished, to go back and click on that and take a look at that. So I wanted to talk about spaces designed for calming down. You can create these in many different places and in many different ways, but I want to really stress that we all think about the younger children, needing these spaces. But older children can need them too. And so this one on the right it's really like a sofa, and they have it in the reading area, but it has this canopy. So a child who needed a little bit of getting away, an elementary age child, could sit there with a book, pull that curtain, and sort of feel like they are getting a little bit of separate time. And of course, I feel like for some kids, you would want to give them, the option to go out into the hallway and access something like this as well. The one in the middle is sort of a middle age type of child, maybe lower elementary. And the one on the left in the cube is really for a little tiny guy. This particular one has a mirror in it. I have seen ones that don't have mirrors, and I guess there would be reasons you might want a mirror or not. And you could put soft pillows in there. You could put books in there. You could put light up toys. And again, I know there's always this kind of push me, pull you that, we don't really want to put just put toys in a Montessori environment. But for some of these children who are having really serious sensory challenges, something like a toy that lights up, they can shake and it lights up, they can focus on it, and you will just see them really calm. So that's what in the sensory world we would call a very adaptive response. And it's very not adaptive for the child to be either super overwhelmed and shut down, or super overwhelmed and running, seeking some kind of input to try to organize herself, but not quite hitting the mark, right? So she's just really dysregulated. So, that's where you can interact with an occupational therapist and try to figure out what are the things. So, I love to have people put those kinds of things in baskets. So they're not just going to be like all over the space, all over the room. There's going to be a certain place where you would have those sensory things, so that if that particular child wanted to take that basket and go into that cube, that would be a sort of a sensory break, calming down place for that child. Oops. So this is a beautiful fish tank viewing station. So I think a lot of times when we're thinking about sensory, the visual, people sort of forget about that, the visual. And I think by the visual, in a Montessori classroom where things are going just the way they're supposed to, children are busy, they're doing their work, they're going to get things, they're sitting down, they're going to get snack, and that can be a lot going on for some children. So this was a beautiful viewing station, and they actually had a rocking chair sitting in front of it, so the child could sit if they wanted to and get a little bit of vestibular input as well. So this is a music listening station, and this was in a school that we went to in Erfurt, Germany. So it's a little bit old-fashioned. I think we would have MP3 players or something now, but so they could be with their friend, but they're each going to listen to their own thing. It could be a story for older kids, maybe who have a language learning difficulty like dyslexia. They may be listening to books on tape, which is really an important part of helping them with their language literacy. And they can do that with a friend, but it doesn't disrupt everybody else. So movement, finding ways for kids to get movement. Of course, the famous little trampoline. I saw a really cool little school in the Midwest where you'd come up the stairs and it opened into this really large area. And so they had some trampoline stations along one wall. So there was enough room for the kids to, come do that and be safe, and not sort of disrupt anybody else in this landing area. So you could put this outside, you could put it inside, you could put it in a gym, you could put it in an OT sensory room, and it could be in a classroom as well. It just depends um, kind of how game you are, or if it really helps the child. I find if you put something like this in a classroom, if you do a lesson about it, show everybody what it is, introduce them to it. There might be a week or two where there's a lot of excitement, and then it'll kind of settle down. And you may realize that there are one or two other kids who really need that trampoline that you didn't really know. You hadn't recognized that need, but you'll see them going to that trampoline. So, I think that it's wonderful, but I know that some people, just find it too disruptive. And sometimes it is just completely disruptive. And then, of course, you have to take it out. Let's see. So this is another way to help children get some movement. This one on the left, it's like an outdoor alleyway, and they painted these hopping spots and some walking lines right on the asphalt. And then the same on the right was like a little patio area. And, I always think about this being kind of a nice community activity. Different classrooms could design, put forward their ideas about how should we paint this? What should we put on there? And what movement activities do we want to do? I've seen ones, I'm going to show you one in a hallway. I've seen ones in hallways too that have like a stopping place, like little stations and activities. So you don't always have to be using them, but if you have someone who's really wound up, you can take that child out, and having that walk on a line, stop and do some wall push-ups, jump from spot to spot, kind of following along with that sequence can be really calming and organizing. And here's one that is in a hallway. And so this child is helping paint this, which I love. Okay, so I want to talk just a little bit about outdoor play and nature spaces. There are so many things that challenges exploration and development of executive skills, some opportunities for solitude and also for socialization. So this is one of my favorite things. I don't know if you can see it, but this little post sticking up at the top of the pile of rocks is a pump. And so the children can go up there and they can pump the water, and then they can come down to this angled pile of rocks and they can move the rocks, and they can, divert the water and make it go where they want to go. So you're getting all this heavy work when they're lifting these heavy rocks. You're getting opportunities for them to cooperate and collaborate and communicate with each other about, how should we do this? So it's social and it's language and it's sensory and motor and executive. It's just wonderful. And let's see. So, and these are some hideaway spaces. Again, you can, as an adult, sort of see into them, but the child, has a sense of being separated and away from things. And these were also in Erfurt. This was also in Germany, but I did not write the name of the school down, but it's a cute little hut. And then using nature. So just pathways are wonderful. This is a nice example of a kind of a combination of a built, constructed slide, and then steps made out of stones built into the hillside. And this is really cute. They took these live vines and they were training them to create like a tunnel. It was really, really lovely. And then this is from Aktion Sonnenschein in Munich, Germany, and it's a little garden. So they have a bench where the children can sit. They also had a greenhouse that was there. So, they can do planting. And again, they could do this on their own. So it could be something that a place where a child could go if they were upset and they needed a break, or it could be for some kids a reward to get to go play in the garden. So that's pretty much the information I prepared for you. And I don't know if any of you have any questions or thoughts you want to share. Did anything come through on the chat?
No, but if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and just ask it, or go ahead and drop it in the chat, and we can take it from there. That was great. I loved seeing all those spaces. It was really interesting.
I had fun going to see them too.
Yeah. Okay, here's one. Do you work with public, private, or homeschools?
Pretty much all of the above. I haven't done as much with homeschools, although I have done some. Yeah, I've done. We have a fair number of public charter schools, sort of near Baltimore. There's a couple in Baltimore. There's a couple here in Frederick. So yeah, I've worked with them, and I've worked with several private ones.
I'm curious if anybody here on the call has made any of these kind of small spaces in their school, or found a novel place to put one. Anybody? No.
At our school, we've had some guides that have baskets of sensory items. So when you said baskets, I was nodding and smiling, because that's something that they're able to give to specific students, so it doesn't turn into a bit of a clamoring for the specific items for all the other students.
Right, and some kids are needing oral input. You know, the ones who are chewing on their collars and stuff. And there are lots of sort of chewy things out there on the market nowadays. And that also could be a basket, a sensory basket for one particular child. Obviously, we're not sharing chewy things. So, you know, but that would be another thing, would be to think for those kids about snack time. And, you know, if you can put something crispy and crunchy, like, you know, fresh apple slices, or even celery, if they would tolerate that, or, you know, different ways to give them some input in their jaw can be really helpful.
I one time worked at a school where we had a sensory room. We had some of the components that you showed, the exercise balls. We had these swings that were sort of problematic. They were a little too heavy for the way they were attached to the ceiling. No one ever got hurt, but it was just something that was, the kids loved them, but it was something that was sort of a recurring problem. Like, we got to fix the swing. We got to, you know, rework how the swing is hanging there. But I also got a lot of good ideas for what you showed. So I appreciate that.
Sure.
But I'm the one that asked the question about what types of schools work with. And the reason I asked that question, I work with a lot of private schools. And the problem is money. And, you know, sometimes families will find that they can identify a more appropriate place for their child with a private school, but the private school does not have the access to the special services that their child needs. And so then they feel forced to put their child into the local public school. And it's a huge dilemma. So I'm looking for ways, you know, to solve that dilemma.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are lots of, I mean, that's a huge, huge question, you know, the funding issue. But part of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, is the 10 essential health benefits. And one of those was habilitative service. So back in the bad old days, I would have children who would come to my practice and their insurance, they thought they had an OT benefit on their insurance. And then the insurance would say, oh, no, we only have rehabilitative. So if you get hit by a truck and you lose function in your arm and your hand, have at it. You can have OT to rehabilitate that. But for the child who is delayed developmentally and hasn't ever developed those skills, it's not rehabilitation, it's habilitation. And oh, sorry, we don't cover that. So under the ACA, that is a must for that to be covered. Now, places that are self-insured don't have to meet those 10 essential health benefits. So sometimes that's a problem. But in any event, another thing that they did was related to children with autism, and they allowed children with autism to get ABA services and bill private insurance while they're at school. So this I see as a really important, door that we're just, kicking our little toe in there to try. So, what I do at a lot of the private places that I work is I get hooked up with the parents' private insurance, and sort of like, well, so they come, I bill it through my company, but I go to the school and I do the service, or I train the staff, or see how things are going periodically or regularly. So that's one way to do it. Another thing that's really important is not exactly today's topic, but germane to your question. One thing that a lot of people don't understand is that services in the schools, particularly as far as OT goes, OT is this huge, field, and we work on all these different things, but services in the school are mandated by IDEA to address the things that the child, that interfere with the child's ability to access their educational program. And so, a lot of what my vision has to do with is much, much, much more than that little, it's like the little slice of the pie. I have seen children who are having, myriad number of problems, and they get an OT evaluation through the school, and they say, well, we're going to give you a slant board and a pencil gripper, and we're going to give you some adapted paper, and, have a good life. Well, if you have a first grader who really is having, looking like maybe dysgraphia, you need to get in there and address that. And a lot of times I find in my private practice, by the time parents figure that out, either they're getting service, and then, years go by and their kid is still, 9 and still can't do this or that or the other thing. And then they come to me. And then that early intervention window has closed, and there's this whole other world of stuff that they could have had. So, this is my own personal little soapbox that I would like to not have that set. This is one reason you don't want to separate medicine and education, and I've had in my jurisdiction, someone say to me from the county, we're really not interested in how the child is functioning in any environment other than the school. Well, that doesn't really make any sense, right? I mean, it's a whole child, and we want that child to function wherever she is. Yep. So all of that also to say that there is a school-based Medicaid program. And I believe that, I don't know that much about it, but you can bill Medicaid, and I don't believe the child has to have a serious disability. So this is one of the things on my list when I have an extra 40 or 50 hours to go find out more about that. But I know, when I worked in DC public schools, for example, they were billing Medicaid for a lot of those kids. So, there are ways to offset some of those costs by either billing private insurance or billing, through public resources. So it's a nut that we need to crack, but Catherine always says to me, it's a big work, Barbara, and it is. We have a lot to do, but.
Oh, that's extremely encouraging. I had not heard that about even tapping into the parents' private insurance or using Medicaid where it's applicable. So that's extremely encouraging, because it's just such a huge problem that I've run into over and over again.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting. Given MMPI, Montessori Medical Partners for Inclusion, MMPI's desire to kind of have more of a confluence, we've been interacting with there's some really nice, fabulous projects out there, people who are collaborating with medicine and education, and it's very interesting. They're really laser focused on primary care, behavioral health, and dental.
Oh, wow.
And nobody's talking about developmental. And I really think that they think that kids are getting what they need, and it's just, and I don't fault the school systems. It's just the way it is, they have this narrow mandate and they have no money and they have tons and tons and tons of children. So, and then this is why I think a lot of those families are seeking Montessori. So, and you were saying they'll go to a place where they can get more services that they think is a better place for their child. But I think Montessori is the place for their child.
That's the tragedy. They find that this is a fitting environment for their child in one way or another because of the distinctives of Montessori, the age appropriateness, the individualization, the concrete representation of concepts. So all of those things are great.
Absolutely.
They need speech pathology, they need OT, and they can't get it at their private Montessori school. So, that's the problem.
So we really encourage people to reach out, to if there's a university near you where they have a graduate program to train speech language, reach out and say, hey, would you want to create a clinic at my school? And then, your last year students could come in and then you can have a professor overseeing the whole thing. And I have seen Loyola does that here in Baltimore. They have a really great speech language therapy department and they have a clinic. And it's basically free, and I've had a lot of kids who, they do a summer camp thing. And, but, so somebody has to kind of reach out and initiate that. And OTs, love that kind of challenge. So, and this OTs and speechies and, psychologists. So, again, it really is a big work, and it really represents a very seismic shift in how we all work together. But I think it could really, really benefit children tremendously.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea about partnering with the university. I just finished my Montessori elementary master's program at Loyola, but I didn't know that they were doing.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. And that's why I was with Baltimore Montessori Public Charter. So.
Oh, I was there. I did some work there, but it's several years back. Yeah, that's a great school.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
So I just want to jump in, Mary. You might be interested. 2 weeks ago, we had Sheila and Alicia, and I don't know if you were at that town hall,
No.
but she specifically has come up with a program in order to bring specialists into her Montessori school, and has a part-time school psychologist on staff that kind of coordinates everything for her. But you know, it might be worthwhile to go back and watch our town hall presentation. It just was 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So it's kind of maybe a model for
Mhm.
bringing specialists right into the school.
Does it have a name? Does that presentation have a name?
I'll put a link to it here in the chat.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure. I don't know if you have access to Montessori Thrive.
I'm not familiar. Oh, yeah, Montessori Thrive, yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. I just started with Montessori Thrive. I just found it.
Great.
Like a week or so. Okay, yeah, I'm glad I did. Okay, thank you for the link.
I was going to add in that we're a private 1st through 8th grade school, but your first place to start when you have children, I mean, one of the first places is the school district your private school is in. Our school district has, part of the mission of school districts is to make sure that everybody who resides is going to school within that school district has all the services they need. So we have a number of families that are sent to the school district for evaluations. We've had OT people from the school district coming and working with our kids, but parents have a right to have services for their children. There's federal dollars, and the part of what school districts get is federal money to support students that are in special services. And so our families that are in our school, then their children are on a service plan, they have what's called a proportionate share, so many dollars that the family can use for services, or they could go to their home school to receive services. But I work closely with our special services director in our school district, and we're a private school, but we have like 10 kids on service plans at our school.
Wow, what state are you in?
Washington State. So
see, I mean, it's really interesting. There's such a patchwork of you know, the way all these services are set up, because here in Maryland, we would never have anything like that, like where the money could follow the child to a private school.
Which yeah, and so I don't understand, because
Really cool.
It's federal dollars. It's our families will get a share, right? So they don't get everything that a child would get if they're in the public system.
Right.
They get a certain dollar amount based on what students are receiving within that school district, and it applies to our students in our school, even though they don't live in this school district. They might live in a different school district. Our school resides in a particular school district, and so that's where the funds come from.
That's
and
amazing.
Evaluations, and so we're really lucky, but it is federal dollars. I also find that there's a disconnect between what the schools know and school psychologists know about this benefit for private schools to what the district, the special services department knows. So my job is to advocate for my families. As a head of school, I advocate for my students and our families, because often there's confusion. So anyhow.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
I know that's true for New Hampshire as well. Right, Karen? Yeah, we had that same setup in our school here too, which is great. We had specialists coming in that were from the public school system coming into our private school. So it's a great resource.
This might be a little bit off topic, but I was thinking that if we set up any type of resource room or had some sort of structures, our staff isn't trained at all to use those pieces. But then you mentioned that you've gone into schools before and you've trained staff for that before.
Yeah. I mean, the whole issue of, you know, setting up sensory stations or a sensory room, there's quite a bit of information that sort of goes into deciding what pieces of equipment and how it should be arranged and how it should be set up. And so I would really recommend to get an OT to come and look at the space and look at your school and sort of assess the needs and that type of thing and help you set it up and then teach staff how to use it. But here's something interesting on the funding line. I was working with a school. It was actually really like an after-school program, sort of wraparound. They had services for children with autism before school and then after school, and then they were having all these, summer programs and so forth. But they got money to set up a sensory room from the Maryland lottery, because there's a rule that a certain percentage, I think it might be 50% of the proceeds from the Maryland lottery have to be spent on, human services types of endeavors. And so it was through United Cerebral Palsy was running this house, and this, smart lady who was the executive director wanted more sensory opportunities for these kids. And she put in a grant and she got $23,000. And then she hired me and I was like, whoa, I get to spend like $20,000 on all this awesome sensory stuff. And we set up a great, beautiful room. And so it's really neat. And, so I think, it is really a patchwork. I think there are different, funding opportunities and so forth in different jurisdictions, but you have to be creative and you just have to talk to everybody you meet and, see what ideas people have.
Yeah. So Karen, who asked that question, just texted me and she said her computer just crashed. So that's what so she's from the school that I was at. So I know her well, but I'll be sure that she hears your whole answer.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions or when we have the experts here? Oh yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to add, for anyone who's bumping up against the health insurance component, that I know that when my health insurance no longer wanted to pay for my son with Down syndrome to receive OT based on a school model, not a medical model, we have a free clinic in Villanova at the law school who came in and helped me navigate and actually go to court against the giant health insurance company. Right. And there are other advocacy programs that you can reach out to help you or help your families navigate that world. I found that they try to, work with people who just won't push back. And if you stand up and start advocating, they're more likely then to listen to you, because if you have a child with different needs, you're exhausted. And sometimes places count on that when they give you their first answer. So there's always places who are going to be willing to help you get what you need for your child. Just wish it was easier, but they're there.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Kathleen, did you want to ask a question?
We've seen a variety of quality in OTs over the years. We've sent children, we've recommended an OT evaluation. We have someone we trust, but the parents took the child to someone else who said he's just fine. Mm-hmm. How do you sift out the ones that, I know it's a tough question.
It's very challenging. It's very challenging to, and I feel the same thing a lot of times. If it's the first time you're saying something to a parent and saying, gee, we're seeing thus and such, do you see that at home? And, in our experience, seems like this, she's really struggling with that. if they, which is almost like 9 chances out of 10, they're very defensive and they're very anxious and they're very worried. And so then a lot of times I'll say, well, you know, why don't you ask your pediatrician? And darned if they don't say, well, let's wait and see.
Right.
You know? And I don't want to wait and see. Like, it's very, very clear to me when I see a child who needs intervention. And of course, the earlier we intervene, the better. So I don't really know how to answer that question, except like you said, if you have somebody that you've worked with and you trust them and you know that they're good and they're on point, see if they will sort of affiliate with your school. You know, and then, you know, I know schools where they have that situation and they just say it up front in the parent handbook. You know, we're going to be doing screenings of all 4-year-olds or whatever it is. And if we see something, you know, we will call so-and-so who's our OT to just have a look, do a short observation. And then if we feel that there's more, you know, there's need for more evaluation, we will recommend that. We'll be in touch with you and we'll discuss it with you. And it's like they sort of have to sign off on that. It is really, really frustrating and challenging to have either therapists or parents who sort of don't seem to want to, you know, really go the mile, go the extra distance for children. And, you know, it's just like, not all Montessori teachers are created equal. Not all OTs are created equal. Not all pediatricians are created equal. You know, and this whole issue of medical, calling it medical, you know, it's really developmental medical people that we're talking about, because there's a lot of medical people who are very medical and they don't know much about development. So, and that's, you know, they need to know about strep throat and ear infections, you know, appendicitis, but it would be nice if they knew a little more about development too. But anyway, so yeah, you just have to kind of keep looking. And I do think it's a really good idea to establish a relationship with one person. And, you know, if you have extra space, right, but certainly something you could do would be to say to an OT or, you know, developmental practice in your area, you know, look, we have this room and, you know, we can rent it to you for $10 a year and you can come set up a clinic here. So then, you know, you're creating a revenue stream for them, theoretically, without costing them. And then you're providing something for your families. But, you know, I know it's really hard. It's really challenging. So
If you were interviewing an OT to work with you, what would you look for in that person? Is that a hard question to answer? Or
I would definitely look for someone who has a deep understanding of sensory processing disorder and sensory integration therapy. I would look for someone who has been working in pediatrics. You know, a more medical model is, oh, you know, any warm body that says OTR after their name is fine. Well, no, you know,
Right.
It's a whole different thing. And for about 20 years ago, I worked at infants and toddlers with 0 to 3, little babies. And I was a fairly experienced therapist. It took me like 2 years to get up to speed, really figure out how to treat those tiny little bodies properly, you know, so you just have to, you know, talk to the person, find out if they did what's called level 2 field work, is the final field work that you do at the end of your training. And you often do 2 of 3, mental health, physical disabilities, or pediatrics. So if they didn't do a level 2 field work in pediatrics, that might be a strike against them. And if you like them and they seem compassionate and, you know, it's a whole mix, but.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
So we're just about coming around to the end of the hour here. So if anybody doesn't, if we don't have any other questions, then last chance.
Thank you all
That-
so much for your attention. And I do urge you to go look at that great sensory room video. And MMPI's website address is on there. So if you want to get in touch with me or take a look at that, we have some great trainings. And I think I sent some stuff over that is available to you guys. And there's also a little ebook that I wrote that I sent over for you. So feel free to get in contact with me if you have more questions.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're
Yeah, we'll be
welcome.
sure to have all those links posted with the recording here. So make it
Thank
easy.
you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was great.
Glad you liked
Welcome.
it.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.